The first thing Haxa noticed upon exiting the disinfectant chamber was the smell. It was glaringly sharp, and as a catfolk, whose sense of smell was certainly better than those monkeys waiting from behind that door, this sharp smell was the equivalent of being assaulted by hundreds of deathbugs. Scanning the room, he saw nothing but a weird-shaped lightning on the ceiling, a chair with a towel on top of it, and his own clothing hanging on the wall. Wanting to leave the room as soon as possible, he ignored the towel, and instead casted a spell at himself. A wave of pure heat covered his body, followed by the sound of sizzles as the water on his fur boiled, before quickly evaporating into the air. His shoulders went limp for a good while, as he felt a fifth of his mana reserve, all gone in a second. Despite the sudden tiredness, his mind was strengthened and reinvigorated at the thought of quickly leaving this hellish place. Those monkeys, or as they like to call themselves, humans, had already stabbed his body with needles countless times yesterday to ensure no disease would harm him. Injection wasn't a bizarre in his realm. What bizarre was the fact that he couldn't detect an inkling of mana from the liquid nor any herbs from it. Moreover, their way of inviting them was absolutely mad. And if it wasn't for the fact that the human did in fact defeat the monster wave that, if not stopped, will annihilate his entire realm, he would have already kicked the human messenger straight back to where their kind came from. Who knows what further insanity will they try on him now? Haxa, the second son of the Duke of Alaves, finished wearing his robe attire, and with a swift motion punched the door wide open. To his surprise, there were no human that greeted him. Instead, it was his uncle, Harel. Uncle Harel was still busy checking himself after the mandatory cleaning. But the moment Haxa stepped outside the door, Harel's face snapped right toward him. None of the frowns from earlier remained when his eyes landed on his niece. The lizard tail flickered briefly. "Haxa, my dear, what was it like?" Harel patted him on the shoulder, firmly, gently. There was a sense of warmth behind it. Even though Harel was not really his biological uncle. They are different species. The old lizard treated him more like his own son than his own biological catfolk father. The smell was horrid. Atch! Haxa sneezed. It wasn't bad, it's just smells really odd and sharp. He turned to look at the lizard at the eye. "Lucky you can just roll your tongue back." A wide, punchable grin appeared on his uncle's face, and he smiled in return. He never got tired of seeing it. The two snapped their faces in the direction of the roaring sound that the two heard repeatedly for the last few days. The sound grew closer and closer until a weird, metallic, horseless carriage approached and stopped right beside them. A human stepped out from one of the doors. "Greeting, esteemed gentlemen. I am Samuel, and I will be the driver of this car for our trip to Toronto. My task is to ensure your safe passage toward Canada, to attend the Southern ARPA conference with the Canadian government to ensure peace and prosperity in both of our worlds." The human said with a light bow, a stretched-out hand, and a tone that perfectly matched their éthique. His speech was fully, from start to finish, in Sautin with a very heavy imperial accent. It was quite unnerving. Haxa and Harel answered his greeting with pleasure, although Haxa couldn't hide his nervousness that well. The human named Samuel ushered them inside the carriage, with a polite look that never left his face. Haxa noticed the carriage dark color, and it gave him quite a good shock that he even paused midway through entering, before quickly realizing his folly, and went right to his seat. "What is it, dear?" Harel asked him, once he was fully seated as well. "No, it's just the car color was pure black. It's like the color of a corpse carrier. I guess their culture views black differently." He mused out loud. "What about you, uncle?" He asked back at Harel, who was looking around the car, before settling his eyes at the vent at the front. "The temperature seems to be perfect, too perfect. They somehow fit a cooler inside that small vent," Harel answered in return. "You know, your talk about the corpse carrier actually reminded me of something," Harel mentioned, though his line was cut off as they both felt the car accelerating. The line of guards with their big metal sticks standing in front of those metal walls was quickly disappearing from their view. Within seconds, the walls were replaced by a clear sky, while other similar car rest around them. Some, however, followed through behind them. The vehicle sped up, and before the car exited the small tiny gate that couldn't possibly hold a single fire spider, what was its purpose, Haxa could briefly read a sign. Portal 7, East Front Street 77, Fort Davis, Texas. Oh yeah, I finally remembered, Harrell said, as the vehicle passed a cemetery filled with sticks in the shape of a cross. A sign read, St. Joseph Cemetery. One of the humans I met earlier asked me if we could do resurrection magic, Harrell mentioned. Haxa looked at Harrell's face closely. His green-slitted eyes, the thin scarred scale around his neck coming from countless battles, and his subtle but firm tightened lips, all moving in a way to tell Haxa that he wasn't joking. What kind of stupid question is that? Haxa blurted out. Harrell had no answer, except for the aforementioned punchable grin. I don't know either. Soon the view from the window changed again, as more and more vehicles on the road appeared speeding beside them, with buildings scattered about here and there filling the city. How fast are we going? Harrell asked. Even the Empire steam trains were slow compared to this. Haxa looked out of the window. The blur of buildings were slowly disappearing and was replaced yet again, with fields all around. Well, it is a bit hard to explain, and there are limitations from the UN and the Dobelas on how much we can share. But to put it simply, it's a set of very fast piston moving from small explosions, powered by processed oil. Haxa looked at Harrell, both sharing a knowing expression of, I recognize the words, but the content is absolute gibberish. How do you avoid collisions or accidents? Haxa asked. His question was soon answered as the car came to a crawling pace. He looked out to see two cars, mangled at one another. One of them has a small fire that was being put out by the men from that big red car. One of them was treating a person who he assumed to be one of the car drivers. That person is dead, Haxel stated without any hesitation. Haxel's sense was something to behold, and his magic skills live up to his status. His magic could detect even the slightest change of energy, and Haxa was sure that his magic was able to penetrate the car and reach the limp human body on the ground, detecting their pulse with no error. Haxa fully trusted him. What are those humans doing? The humans answered Harrell's question by surrounding the corpse and sticking two hand pads toward its chest. Thunder. It releases thunder. And... Haxel's speech stopped right in his tracks, staring at the corpse. He is alive again.